Hey guys, welcome. Sports and Shorts episode. Man, Ren City, back at it again, doing our thing. We'll start each episode like we always do, honoring people that wore the number that matches our jersey number. And right now we're at episode 49, so let's do our thing. We'll hop right to it. When I think of people that wore the number 49, first one I comes to mind has got to be one of the best knuckleball throwers of his generation. I'm talking about Red Sox legend Tim Wakefield. Played college ball at Florida Tech, named MVP at first base of all things. That led him to getting drafted in the 8th round as a first baseman by the Pirates, and then he was told he'd never get above Double A as a position player, and if he wanted to make it in this league, he'd have to work on a knuckleball. So that's what he did. He went full time pitching into that, getting called up with the Pirates to help out with the playoff bound Pirates. Through a complete game, striking out 10 batters with an insane 146 pitches. You won't see that very often. He did great with the Pirates down the stretch there, helping win the NL East and then the playoff series against the Braves. He'd throw 2 complete games, winning both his starts. He was named opening starter for the Pirates the following year, and then he'd walk 9 batters, losing his spot in the rotation, going down to the minors where he'd get released by Pittsburgh. Boston would sign him with a deal, and he'd begin working with the Necro brothers, Phil and Joe. Great knuckleball pitchers. He'd spend the next 17 seasons with the Red Sox, earning one All-Star appearance in 2009, and he'd be part of the two World Series winning rings for the franchise. The one in 2004, the curse-breaking one, and then again in 2007. He was constantly involved in the community, where he'd win the Roberto Clemente Award. You guys may remember Roberto Clemente from episode 21, and he was nominated 8 times for that award, so it was cool he got to win it. He was one of the oldest players in the majors, and he retired in 2011 at the age of 45. He was inducted to the Red Sox Hall of Fame. Sadly, on October 1st, though, 2023, just months ago, Wakefield died at his home in Massachusetts of a seizure resulting from brain cancer. It was a shock to many who didn't even know he had brain cancer. The diagnosis was revealed days earlier by Wakefield's former teammate, Curt Schilling, which caused some controversy because the release was not authorized by Wakefield or his family. So it's a sad ending to one of the good guys in baseball who will be remembered for his unique pitching, especially in the Boston area. We'll stick with pitchers. Next 49, New York Yankee legend Ron Guidry, Gator attended, as he was called, Gator, attended and pitched for the University of Southwestern Louisiana when he played there. What he did there led to him getting drafted by the Yankees in the 71 draft, and they put him in the regular rotation, almost trading him to the Orioles or the Blue Jays. Both those trades were vetoed last minute, and he'd start as a reliever, but would get his chance with Mike Therese getting injured, and from there he'd go back into the lineup, and he was a surprise to the Yankees, helping them win back-to-back World Series in 77 and 78, including the Cy Young in 78, while leading the AL in wins and ERA. He'd go on to lead the AL in wins and ERA another time, making 4 All-Star games over his career, also winning 5 Gold Gloves and the Roberto Clemente Award. Guidry would be a pitching coach for the Yankees from 2006-2007. True Yankee through and through. His 49's retired by the Yankees, and he's honored in Monument Park. Next 49, we'll stick with retired pitchers. Next up, Larry Dierker. He was signed to the Houston Colt 45s. Great name, by the way, before they became the Astros. They won a bidding war against teams like the Chicago Cubs. He made his major league debut on his 18th birthday and struck out Willie Mays in the first inning. Not a bad birthday. It took him a few years to get going, though. In 1969, he became the Astros' first 20-game winner. He'd make the All-Star game that season as well. He'd make one more All-Star game in his career, also with the Astros, but he'd throw out his only no-hitter in 1976 against the Expos. Following season, Dierker was traded to the Cardinals, where he wrapped up his career. He'd come back to manage the Astros, leading the club for 5 seasons, and he had reasonable success with them, but resigned after direct urging from the owner of the Astros, Drayton McClain, after he was approached by the players who disagreed with Dierker's philosophy, and he admitted that the players were probably getting tired of him. And he had a health scare while with the team in '99. He had a grand mal seizure that rendered him unconscious and nearly killed him. He required emergency brain surgery and pulled through, even returning to managing later that season. His 49's retired by the Astros, and he's in their Hall of Fame. We'll end the baseball portion of this with another retired pitcher. This one a little more recent. I'm talking about Jake Arrieta. Played college ball at TCU with the Horned Frogs. That led him getting drafted in the fifth round in the 2007 draft by the Orioles. He never did get the big show call up with the Orioles. He did get his call up there, but never blossomed. He'd get traded to the Cubs, and that's where he started to shine. In 2015, he'd lead the MLB in wins and throw a no-hitter against the Dodgers. That led him to winning his one and only Cy Young Award. The following season, he'd make the All-Star game, win a Silver Slugger, throw another no-hitter, and a blowout win over the Reds. And that continued into the playoffs, where Arrieta won 2 games in the 2016 World Series as the Cubs broke a 108-year World Series drought by beating the Cleveland Indians in 7. Arrieta would move on to play for the Phillies a few seasons before returning to the Cubs in another stint. He finished his career in San Diego, but yeah, he was something else. He even represented U.S. in the World University Championships, where he won gold, and he was part of the bronze medal winning baseball team in the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. I don't know if he's got Hall of Fame numbers, but he was part of a pretty monumental team in Chicago. We might get his number honored there. We'll see what happens going forward. But leaving the diamond, we'll go right to the gridiron, starting with former NFL fullback Tony Richardson. Very important piece at Auburn University. And despite his great play there, he'd go undrafted in the '94 draft, signing with the Cowboys practice squad, but never cracking the roster. He'd sign with the Chiefs, and while there, he'd block for Priest Holmes and Larry Johnson, getting those two guys their most productive seasons in the NFL. He'd make 2 Pro Bowls, 1 second-team All-Pro as a Chief. After that contract was up, he'd sign with the Vikings, where he'd make another Pro Bowl, and helping lead Chester Taylor to a 1,000-yard rushing career, the only one in his career. So he was pretty good lead blocker. He'd sign with the Jets, where he'd finish his career. And in his last season in the NFL, he won the Walter Payton Award for standout work in the community. Named All Decades Team for 2000s, inducted into the Chiefs Hall of Fame. Like I said, one of the best lead blockers in his generation. The fullback's kind of a forgotten position nowadays. It was on its way out when I was a young pup, but he was one of the best to do it, and it's a very important position. I still think you have a lot of pulling guards and whatnot doing what the fullback did, but I still think if you need that yard, having that lead blocker is very important. But we'll stick with the offensive side of the ball, go to Bobby Mitchell. Played halfback as well as wide receiver, going to Illinois University, where he played football and participated in track. He was debating going down the track route until Brown's head coach, Paul Brown, offered him $7,000 during his rookie season to play football rather than go to the Olympics. They took him in the 7th round of the '58 draft, where he teamed up with Jim Brown to give him one of the most lethal running back combinations of the time. Big moments as a rookie, earning a Pro Bowl nod, and he's pretty big numbers as a returner too. But there was some pressure from the U.S. government to integrate the Washington Redskins. So in response, Washington selected Ernie Davis first overall in the '62 draft. But the owner was kind of wary of Davis's salary demands, so he was traded to the Browns for Mitchell and first-round lottery pick Leroy Jackson. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time was that Davis had leukemia, and he died without ever playing a professional down in football. Mitchell, along with John Nisby and Ron Hatcher, were the only 3 black players on the 1962 Washington team, as they were the last football team to integrate colored players onto the team. And 1962 is not that long ago. The coach moved Mitchell to wide receiver. He'd thrive there, making 3 straight Pro Bowls, bringing his career total of 4. He'd make 3 team All-Pros, 2 second All-Pros. He'd lead the NFL in receptions in '62, also leading the league in yards that year. He'd lead the league in yards one other time and touchdowns another season. He's also part of that record-sharing longest touchdown receiving group at 99 yards. You can't really get much longer than that. He'd work as an executive in Washington after retiring from playing and was involved with 3 Super Bowl winning teams. And Washington man through and through, spending 41 years with the franchise, named one of the 88 greatest Redskins and inducted into their Commander's Ring of Honor. He's also got his number 49 retired by the franchise, so Yeah, he's a pretty amazing player. His time in Cleveland was brief, but he was honored by the Browns, inducted into their Ring of Honor, and he'd get immortalized in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. A respectable man that did a lot for the people of color. Fortunately, he passed away in 2020 at the age of 84. Next up, at number 49, we go to the defense side. Dennis Smith, beast at USC, consensus All American as a senior. Played in two Rose Bowls with the Trojans, winning a national championship in '78. Playing along some pretty good legends. Ronnie Lott, episode 42. Joey Browner, episode 47. These are all jersey honors. His great play in college led to the Broncos taking him 15th overall in the '81 draft, and he was one of the most feared and hardest hitting safeties in the NFL. A lot of his hits wouldn't be allowed today. He makes 6 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pros, 1 second-team. He's the franchise leader in tackles with the Broncos, and you consider who the Broncos have had on defense, it's pretty impressive. He was inducted into the USC Ring of Fame and then later the Denver Broncos Ring of Fame. We'll wrap up the NFL side of the 49 portion by going to Chicago linebacker Tremaine Edmonds. Current player, he was a beast at Virginia Tech, second team All SSC as a sophomore, first team as a junior. He decided to forego his senior season and go right to the NFL. Bills selected Edmonds in the 16th overall pick. He intercepted Sam Darnold in Week 14, and at 20 was the youngest NFL player to ever record an interception. Second season, he was named captain of the team, going to back-to-back Pro Bowls. After 5 years in Buffalo, he signed a deal to join the Bears, where he had a great debut season and registered his first pick six against comeback player of the year. Whoa, don't want to spoil too much yet, Joe Flacco. So the 25-year-old has already been a vet in this league. I see more Pro Bowls coming his way. Leave the football field, go to the hockey rink. First number 49 is a current one. Las Vegas Golden Knights center Ivan Barbashev. Barbashev dominated in Russia growing up, and he'd go with the Moncton Wildcats in the CHL import draft, where he also lit it up, leading to the Blues taking him in the second round of the 2014 draft. He'd make his professional debut with the Blues affiliate Chicago Wolves, leading to getting called up and being a big member of the Blues' first ever Stanley Cup win. After a few seasons there, he'd get traded to the Golden Knights, where he'd find immediate success and once again be an important part of a Stanley Cup run. So he's already got two to his name. So pretty impressive. He did sign a 5-year contract to stay with the Knights. It looks like a pretty good pairing, and he's also represented Russia on the international stage. Next 49 also happens to be a current one, Sam Girard. He was a beast with the Shawinigan Cataracts in the QMJHL, which led to the Predators taking him in the second round of the draft. He'd continue to light it up with the team in the QMJHL before he'd get assigned to the Predators affiliate, Milwaukee Admirals. He'd do great things there before making his NHL debut the following season, where he'd get shipped to the Avalanche. And he's been a pretty good defenseman on the Avalanche and was a key member of the 2022 Stanley Cup winning team. 25-year-old still rocks it in Colorado and really good player. Last number 49 I'll mention is a retired player, Brian Savage. He was drafted 8th round by the Montreal Canadiens after a good college career at the Miami University. Didn't even know they had a hockey team in the University of Miami. He'd play professionally with the Fredericton Canadiens in the AHL, and then he'd get called up to the NHL, but he wouldn't be a fixture till the following season when he became the first Canadian in 82 years to record 6 points in a road game. Also recording the first Canadiens hat trick in Bell Center history. So pretty cool. And he also earned a nickname not so cool, Mr. October, for getting off the hot starts in the season and then fading away. Like I said, not the best nickname. There was one basketball mention that was a tough one. Shannon Anderson, not a household name by any means. Played 4 years at Georgia. Got selected by the Jazz in the second round. And known more for his defense. His best year was in Houston, where he scored 12.3 per game. But he'd go on to play with the Knicks and Heat, where he'd wear the 49. Other than that, it's pretty slim pickings. He was a member of the 2006 Miami Heat team. So there's your jerseys, number 49. Bam, bam, bam. But hey, to the sports week, starting with the biggest game of all, Super Bowl 58. Long wait, finally got there. We had the 49ers representing the NFC, the Kansas City Chiefs representing the AFC. After weeks of build-up, we got to finally watch the game. Looked like Vegas was ready for it. Once the game got going, you could see a little bit of rust between both teams. No scoring in the first quarter. But then the 49ers, in their opening drive, they were looking to get a score. But Christian McCaffrey would get stripped and the 49ers would recover. But in the first points would come in the beginning of the second quarter when 49ers rookie kicker Jake Moody would kick the longest field goal in Super Bowl history, knocking a 55-yarder through. The Chiefs were looking to answer, and Mahomes would find Mecole Hardman deep, putting him right in the 49ers territory. But then Isaiah Pacheco would fumble it. San Fran would recover, so keeping the Chiefs off the board again. And then when the Chiefs went to receive the ball next, devastation hit the 49ers. Unreal. I can't believe this even happened. Like, you saw the defense getting ready to come on the field. Dre Greenlaw, superstar linebacker, was hopping up and down, ready to come on. And just as he pushed off to go onto the field, his leg gave out. He crumbled. Found out he tore his Achilles on the play. Unreal. He was taken off on a cart to the locker room. Could not believe what was happening. You could see the tears in his eyes and just a massive blow to the team. But they'd have to keep going. And later on, the 49ers would dip into their bag of tricks. And Brock Purdy would throw a backwards lateral crossfield to Juwan Jennings, who would then throw it back the other way, finding Christian McCaffrey. He would do a little scamper getting in the end zone, making it 10-0 49ers. And just like most games, in the last 2 minutes of the half, the Chiefs would score. Harrison Butker would kick a field goal to make it 10-3. And you have the halftime show. Pretty good, I thought. I like Usher. A lot of good tunes, enough gyrating and shirtless action that there might have been some pregnancies after. Who knows? But pretty good, I thought. I'm not hating on it. I've seen better ones, but I definitely enjoyed it, What more can you ask out of a halftime performance? When they did My Boo, and Alicia Keys was getting all hugged up on Usher, I'm like, oh, wonder what Swizz Beatz is thinking about this right now. But pretty good. Pretty good in my opinion. But hey, the game would come back, and what a second half. The Chiefs were looking to move the ball down the field, and Mahomes threw a rare interception. It kind of in between Kelsey and another wide receiver hitting 49ers guy right in the numbers. So they wouldn't get any numbers or any points off the turnover, but a huge play nonetheless. The Chiefs would then be the next team to score. They'd go down the field, and Harrison Butker would say, I see your 55-yard field goal. I'll raise you, and hit a 57-yard field goal, breaking the previous record just set earlier in that game. And then the 49ers would force the Chiefs to punt, and it wasn't the best hit punt, but it played out in their favor. The ball struck a 49ers player on the foot, and return man Ray McLeod saw it and went to pounce on it, but he couldn't get to it. Chiefs would recover. Like soon after, Mahomes would hit Marquez Valdez-Scantling in the end zone. Boom, suddenly Chiefs are ahead 13-10, three unanswered scores. 49ers would need to answer, moving the ball down the field, and it would come to 4th and 3. Down 3, usually you say take the points, but Kyle Shanahan said, let's go for it. Purdy would hit Kittle, pick up the first down. Soon after, Purdy would hit Jennings, who would power into the end zone, giving him a throwing touchdown and a receiving touchdown in the game. Second player ever to do that in Super Bowl history. Philadelphia Eagles' Nick Foles being the first to do that a few years ago with the Philly special. But one of the biggest plays of the game would happen right after. The Chiefs would block the extra point, keeping the 49ers lead at 16-13. The Niners defense would keep Mahomes out of the end zone again. Another Butker field goal. We're tied at 16. The 49ers would then move down the field. Chiefs defense holds up. Another field goal. Rookie's kicker, Moody, bangs it through. A 53-yarder, by the way. Not an easy one. Good kicking in this one. So that field goal puts them up 3 with 1:53 left in the game, right? An eternity for Patrick Mahomes. And he pushed the Chiefs down the field, and it wasn't easy. There'd be some big third downs, and they'd do what they had to do, but they'd set it up, kick the field goal, force overtime, and just like that, boom, we'd go to overtime. First time since the new rule changes, and only the second time in history. So, we went into the game here. Moody would go down the 49ers would win the toss and elect to keep the ball, which a lot of people were like, well, that's interesting, why you wouldn't send the other team to do it first. But regardless, they'd keep the ball, go down the field. Moody would hit another field goal, 22-19. So Mahomes gets the ball back. Big third down around midfield. 49ers decide to bring pressure against Mahomes. It doesn't usually go well. He found Rice. Boom, big play. Another few plays later. Another big third down. This time Mahomes was scampering all over the place. Picked it up. Few plays from there, Mahomes would find McCole Hardman in the end zone. Boom, Bob's your uncle. That's the game. Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl in overtime. The play was like a fake motion looking play where Hardman looked like he was coming in and went back out. It's called corn dog in their playbook. We've seen it before with Andy Reid, just not in a while. I thought ESPN's Mina Kimes summed it up perfectly on Twitter when she said the corn dog, the fake motion play, reappearing like a minor character we forgot about, making a cameo in the season finale. Amazing play call, and even more so, an amazing execution of the play. What a comeback win. What a game. The Chiefs win Super Bowl 58. First to win back to back since the Patriots won it in 2003 and again in 2004. Just the eighth franchise to do so. Steelers did it twice during the 70s, but Patrick Mahomes, man, third Super Bowl in 5 seasons. They're a dynasty, you know. They're no longer a dynasty of one, as Will Bond called them before they racked up 2 more here. Mahomes ties Montana with the second most Super Bowl MVPs in history with 3. 2 behind Tom Brady was 5 of the 7 Super Bowl rings. But again, huge night for the Chiefs. Lots of attention on Taylor Swift, obviously. Many shots of her sitting in her area with Blake Lively and Ice Spice. Her man Travis Kelce, he played pretty big in this game. Really a fairy tale ending for the Chiefs season. They had a lot of adversity along the way. This was a down year for the Chiefs, and they won the fucking Super Bowl. So what is that saying? We're witnessing greatness in Patrick Mahomes. Some are already saying, man, he's the GOAT. But I think we can't quite put that there. He's not quite up to the same amount of Super Bowl wins, but it's pretty hard not to. What he's doing is just crazy. He has a chance to make history, something no one's ever done in NFL history, and that's win 3 Super Bowls in a row. They have a chance. Mahomes is coming back next year. They're bringing the band back. They could do it. For the 49ers, this is a tough pill to swallow. They were looking so good so many times. It really, came down to some stupid, shitty plays, They kind of went away from Christian McCaffrey in the second half. That hurt them. The big thing was the injury to Dre Greenlaw and just jumping up and down, getting ready to go on the field. You don't expect to tear your Achilles. Debo and Kittle would pick up injuries in the second half, have to miss a few plays. That early fumble on the opening drive by McCaffrey was huge. The fumble on special teams where it hit somebody's ankle on the return while they're blocking, that block extra point. These are a handful of plays that compound into one massive amount of shit, leading into a loss against, one of the best to ever play. When you're playing against Mahomes, you almost need to be flawless, right? Purdy made plays, but not enough big time ones when it mattered. A few of those field goals turned the touchdowns. We're talking about him now. You got to feel for Kyle Shanahan. Like I said, 2 Super Bowls have gone to overtime in NFL history, and Shanahan's been on the losing end of both. He was the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons in that historic collapse against the Patriots in Super Bowl 51. Now he's got this OT loss on his resume. You just got to feel for the guy. He's one of the most talented offensive minds out there, and they just seem to come up short in the big game. You don't want to be known as that guy, but what a game. That, as a guy, as a neutral watching that, at the beginning of the year, I picked the Niners to win with McCaffrey winning MVP. I came up a little short, but what a game. But hey, before that game went down, we had some news going on. We had some Hall of Fame classes, some hardware. So the 2024 Hall of Fame class includes pass rusher Dwight Freeney, perhaps the greatest return man in NFL history, Devin Hester, Houston Texans legendary wide receiver Andre Johnson, defensive stud Julius Peppers, who as well as Donovan McNabb are the only 2 players to appear in NCAA Final Four and a Super Bowl. Linebacker Patrick Willis, his career was too short, but what a career. 2 senior inductees, former Broncos linebacker Randy Gradisar, and lineman of the famous Bears defense and their title-winning defense in the 80s, Steve McMichael. That McMichael one's pretty big. The Bears legend was diagnosed with ALS and has been battling it in hopes of getting to the Hall. With his induction coming up, I really hope he can stick around to see that happen. For the trophies, as Drake says, no surprise, Baltimore Ravens' Lamar Jackson won NFL MVP, the second of his young career. Offensive Player of the Year went to 49ers Christian McCaffrey. Defensive Player of the Year to Cleveland's Myles Garrett. dominant force and one of the best on the best defense in the NFL. Some were saying, "Hey, why isn't T.J. Watt from Pittsburgh getting that?" But I'm okay with the Garrett call. To the rookies, Houston. Well, things are looking good for Houston going forward. Rookie quarterback sensation C.J. Stroud won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Number 2 overall pick looked amazing, helping the Texans get to the postseason. Defensive Rookie of the Year went to Will Anderson Jr. He was selected right after Stroud in that number 3 spot, and he was looking well deserving of that draft position. So, like I said, future looks awesome in Houston. Coach of the Year, Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski. I thought it might go to DeMeco Ryans in Houston, but what adversity Stefanski went through in Cleveland, the injuries upon injuries, the quarterback. Then here's part of the reason they got to the playoffs. Comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco, from the couch to your starting lineup to lead the Browns to the playoffs. So I might have gave that away earlier in the show, but yeah, good on Joe Flacco. Even though some say, should he have got it? Should we have maybe gave it to Hamlin from Buffalo? I mean, he technically was dead last year. How much further can you come back than that? But he didn't really play a lot, so I don't know. Comeback player of the year, they both did great. Good on Flacco for what he did there, and good on Hamlin for staying alive, as the BGs say. But a few more hires on some coaching staff. Seahawks were looking to hire Ryan Grubb, new offensive coordinator. Former Washington offensive coordinator was looking to follow his head coach DeBoer to Alabama and be the OC there, but just days after agreeing to the position, it sounds like he's returning to the Northwest for his first NFL offensive coordinator job. And it said the Seahawks are looking at former Cowboys defensive line coach Aiden Durden to be their new defensive coordinator. Not official yet, but it's looking like that's going to happen. And the Cowboys, who are they going to have as their defensive coordinator? Look no further than Mike Zimmer. He's been out of the league the past few years, but he was coaching the Minnesota Vikings. Really good defensive coach. I think he'll fit in great with the Cowboys there. It's expected that the New Orleans Saints will pluck Clint Kubiak. Wow, there's a lot of alliterativeness there away from the 49ers staff. The up-and-coming offensive mind is expected to be hired as their new offensive coordinator. A few coordinator positions left to be filled in the NFL, but, the off-season's in full swing now. Our eyes are on the NFL draft taking place in Detroit, April 25th and 27th. So, yeah, a little bit of a pause on the NFL season for a bit. I know. We'll be back, though. We had some good midweek footy here in the Copa del Rey. Some first leg action going on in the semifinals. Real Sociedad Mallorca, they played to a 0-0 draw. Next leg going on February 27th. The other matchup had Atletico Madrid hosting Athletic Bilbao. About halfway through the first half, a clumsy tackle in the box would lead to a penalty, and Romero would step up and convert from the spot. The score stayed that way, but Atletico had some big chances. They'd get some cleared off the line. They looked like they were getting a penalty, but VAR said, Athletic Bilbao takes the game 1-0. Their second leg takes place on the leap day, February 29th. That was some Spanish Cup play. We had some German Cup play in the Pokal Cup. Wild game between two Premier League sides. Leverkusen looking to stay unbeaten on their season. They're just winning everything. And this one would come down to the wire. And Stuttgart would go ahead in this game, forcing Leverkusen to come back. And they'd come back late, the 90-minute mark, taking the lead for the first time as they move on to the next round of that tournament. We were supposed to have Saarbrücken, the third division side, take on Mönchengladbach, but there was so much rain, the pitch was waterlogged. They had guys out there with leaf blowers trying to dry it off. You felt bad for the 16,000 that showed up to the game, but they had to call the game. And then it was announced the game will be going on my birthday, March 12th, Tuesday, so that'll be the last quarterfinal match left in the Pokal Cup. Some FA Cup replays went down this midweek as well, wrapping up the fourth round of the FA Cup. You had some big matches, a championship side. Southampton and Watford faced it off, all Southampton. They won 3-0. Another matchup had Coventry beating Sheffield Wednesday 4-1. Leeds United beat up on Plymouth Argyle 4-1. Premier League side Nottingham Forest needed penalties to knock out championship side Bristol City. And the only other EPL match, Chelsea thumped Aston Villa. The fifth round of the FA Cup commences in the next few weeks here. AFCON, the wild tournament going on, the African Cup of Nations. You'd have Nigeria and South Africa in penalties, or in the semifinals. Sorry, it would go to penalties where Nigeria would hold on. Clutch strike by Leicester City striker Iheanacho to bank it in off the post and punch Nigeria's ticket to the finals. The other game was Ivory Coast and Congo, and this game was scoreless until the 65th minute, until a dangerous cross into the box looked unreachable, except 6'3" Sebastian Haller, former West Ham man, would stick his leg way up there and thump it into the ground, looping it over the keeper and punching the Ivory Coast ticket to the final. So you had a third place game between the two losers of that match, South Africa and Congo, and after no goals, this one would go to penalties, and Congo had a chance to win it. Their captain Mbemba, all he had to do was score. But South African keeper Williams made a massive stop, and that stop proved large. Because 2 shots later, he'd make another save, and South Africa would win third in the tournament. Big night for them, huge game. Awesome. He made up because he didn't have his best performance in the penalties against Nigeria, so it was good on Williams to make up for it. But all that would bring us to the final, and what a final going down. You had Ivory Coast taking on Nigeria. Nigeria would go ahead first in this one. A corner kick would get knocked sky high, and the towering Nigerian defender, William Troost-Ekong, would rise up and head the ball right in the net, putting them up 1-0 38 minutes in. Second half, the Ivory Coast really ramped up the pressure. They'd continue to get corner kick after corner kick. And off one of the corners, the ball would come to Frank Kessié, who would head it into the net. And after 62 minutes, we had a tie game. Ivory Coast kept their foot on the pedal, and then 81st minute, who else? Sebastian Haller. Again, showing off that flexibility, redirecting the ball into the net. And that would be the difference maker. Ivory Coast win AFCON. Fucking real. Like, this team sacked their manager after group play, thinking they were done. Barely qualified, squeaking through in as a wild card, and winning the whole tournament with an interim manager. You can't even write shit like that up. Congrats to the Côte d'Ivoire for winning. Ivory Coast. You could see legend Didier Drogba in the crowd losing his mind on that go-ahead goal. Love to see it. What a great tournament the AFCON was. This is probably the most coverage I've seen of it because it was all on Fubo TV, which I have. So, yeah, great tournament. Loved it. There was the Asian Cup. I didn't even give this much coverage. I didn't have any real... This wasn't on any of the streaming services I have, but there were some pretty good games. You had the semifinals where Jordan beat South Korea, and no one saw that coming. And then Qatar would upset Iran, setting up a final between Jordan and Qatar. Qatar would take it 3-1. All 3 of their goals were scored from the penalty spot. Ikram Afif, he stood up and he knocked them all down, you know. First international hat trick in his career. Couldn't have come at a better time as they win the Asian Cup back-to-back tournaments. They had won in 2019 over Japan with the same scoreline, but it's a little fishy when all 3 of your goals are at home and they're all penalties. Yeah, but hey, you know, congrats to them. On the weekend, we had some good stuff. The Premier League was in full swing. Match day 24 kicking off with an exciting one to start. You had Man City hosting Everton. Everton was doing their darndest to stay in it, and despite the constant pressure by Man City, but in the 71st minute, they'd finally break through a corner kick, have the ball bouncing to Erling Haaland, and the big Norwegian would blast it into the net. First goal in 77 days after he's been dealing with injuries, and that kind of opened the floodgates a bit. Counterattack led to Kevin De Bruyne perfectly placing this ball to Haaland, who outmuscled the young Jared Branthwaite before getting his second goal of the match. City would win that 2-0. Brentford went on the road against Wolves, and they'd get a goal by Christian Norgard and a second-half goal by Ivan Toney, as they'd go in and win 2-0, getting Mark Flecken the clean sheet in that one. Fulham hosted Bournemouth. Not even 6 minutes into the game, a heavy touch by the Bournemouth defender would set up Cordova Reid perfectly. Nice blast into the net, giving them the lead. Rodrigo Muniz would double the lead for Fulham. But early in the second half, the visitors would make it interesting when Senesi would get a goal off the corner, but it would be short-lived because not even 2 minutes later, Muniz would get his second of the game as Fulham take the win 3-1. Another London side, Tottenham, found themselves a goal down after Pascal Gross would convert from the spot for Brighton. But the home side would ramp it up a bit and get their equalizer when Pepe Sarr would finish a nice run. cross it, the defender would block it, would come back to him, so we just kick it into the net. And Son, who recently returned from the Asian Cup after getting knocked out on his way to the final there, he was substituted on, and he perfectly crossed the ball over to where's his name? Brennan Johnson, sorry, and he blasted into the net, giving Tottenham the huge 2-1 comeback victory. And the shocking result, Kenilworth Road, Sheffield United, who's been at the bottom of the Premier League for some time, went on the road and beat fellow promoted side Luton Town 3-1. They definitely went full defensive after going up 2-0, and it worked out for them, you know. First road win of the campaign and their first win in the league since December 9th. So big on them trying to stay alive in the league. Liverpool hosted Burnley, and after Dara O'Shea cancelled out an early Diogo Jota goal, things looked like it could get dicey, but second half goals by Luis Diaz and Darwin Nunez sealed the win for Liverpool. On Saturday, there were massive games going on in Europe at the same time. We'll get to them, but there were big games in Germany and Spain, all being played at the same time. And a game in the Premier League kicked off at the same time, and it might have been the most exciting of the bunch. Forest hosted Newcastle, and just 10 minutes in, a Newcastle corner would find Bruno Guimaraes, who would get the easy tap in. Forrest would answer by a perfectly weighted Gibbs White pass, going the speedster Elanga, who easily got the ball before Dubravka tried to get out there. The keeper was in no man's land, thinking he could get there before Elanga. He'd get the easy goal, and looked like we'd have a 1-1 tie going in the half. But as I was approaching, Forrest would try to clear it. Fabian Schär blasted into the net, giving Newcastle the lead again. And then 6 minutes of stoppage time, Callum Hudson-Odoi would get his shot deflected, and we'd be 2-2 going in the half. And it looked like things would get turned on its head a bit. A terrible Forest giveaway in their own end where the ball was passed. He kicked it right to Bruno, curled it into the net, giving Newcastle the 3-2 lead, and this time they'd keep it, taking a big win there. Sunday matches, you had a London derby that could have not gone anywhere. So my West Ham was hosting rivals Arsenal, and it got pretty ugly. They got one, and the floodgates open. Saliba would score in the 32nd off a corner. Saka would get the ball on the long ball, get tripped up. VAR would check it. It'd be a penalty. He'd score. Former West Ham captain Declan Rice would curl one in the box where Gabriel would hit it. Then a few minutes later, Trossard would score in stoppage time, giving Arsenal a 4-0 lead before halftime. 4 goals in 15 minutes. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. They panned outside of the London Stadium, and there were people just leaving. People were leaving. The West Ham fans were like, fuck it. Half of this is good enough. It didn't end there, though. Saka would get his second of the match before Declan Rice would just hit a beauty, reminding us of what we're missing when he left. He didn't really celebrate out of respect to West Ham, so you got to appreciate that. But what a 6-0 terrible loss. We're really struggling out without Paqueta in the lineup. We need Antonio back too, but without Paqueta, oof. The last 2 matches we've lost by a combined 9-0 and haven't won the Premier League since December 28th. So 2024 has been a little rough to West Ham. The other big matchup on Sunday at Aston Villa hosting Man U. Man U would get off to a great start when Rasmus Holland would score off a corner in the 17th minute. The game would stay that way until Aston Villa kind of ramped it up. They'd get a corner kick, and Onana would make a nice save for Man U, but the ball would get parried. It would come back into the box where Douglas Luiz would score it and did some aggressive shimmying. I don't think I've seen anyone shimmy that hard in a long time. It was ridiculous and awesome, but looked like Villa would get another goal. That shimmy really inspired them, it looked like. But Man U, they'd get a late chance, and the cross in the box was met by the 5-headed Scott McTominay, who just blasted it in there. Huge goal for Scott McTominay as he leads Man U in goals this season, which is crazy in itself. But they needed a win. They picked up a big win against usually a tough Aston Villa side, where I just seeing more of Unai Emery. He definitely looks like a vampire. He might be. There's one more match left in the match day. Crystal Palace hosts Chelsea in a London derby. That should be pretty exciting. So right now, Liverpool sitting atop the Premier League, 2-point lead over Man City and Arsenal. However, Man City still have that game in hand. Tottenham leapt over Aston Villa with their win coinciding with Villa's loss to round out the top 4. We head to Germany. A midweek makeup game between Mainz and Union Berlin went down. That was a makeup game, that was postponed due to the weather. It looked like there would be no goals in the first half, and then 8 minutes in the stoppage time, Jonathan Burkhardt would put Mainz ahead. The everlasting first half continued, and then Union Berlin would score in the 13th minute, and that's how the game would end. A draw as the two teams are battling it out in the bottom of the table. All the teams are on even games now, going in the match day 21. The weekend starting off with a bang. Dortmund maintained their great play by easily dispatching Freiburg at home. Malin picking up 2 goals in that as Fulkrig got the third, and he continues to score at a high rate. Werder Bremen would host Heidenheim, and we'd have a fury of goals in a short period of time. Maloney would open the scoring for the visitors, and then not even 6 minutes later, Best would double Heidenheim's lead. And then not even a minute later, Romano Schmid would score and cut the lead in half for Werder Bremen, and that would be it for goals. Heidenheim picking up their first win in the Bundesliga since December 20th. Union Berlin picked up a big 1-0 win over Wolfsburg. The goal was scored at a time you never see. Doki scored in the 25th minute of stoppage time of the first half. That doesn't even sound like a real thing. That's as late as it gets there. Stuttgart would use 2 first half stoppage goals within minutes of each other to propel themselves to a 3-1 win over Mainz. And a lot of the other matches in the German top division ended in draws. Mönchengladbach and Darmstadt would play to a scoreless draw. 2 early first half goals canceled each other out in a 1-1 draw between Frankfurt and Bochum. 2 goals in the last bit of Hoffenheim versus Cologne gave a 1-1 draw. Finkgraf scored in the 79th minute to give Cologne the lead in the thoughts of winning until Kramaric scored in the 94th minute to kill those dreams. Augsburg hosted Leipzig in an exciting one. Augsburg would go ahead through Philipp Tietz, but that would get answered just 4 minutes later by Lois Mpanda. Then in the second half, it would be Leipzig that would go ahead when Sesko would score in the 52nd minute. But it would be Augsburg's return the reply, and who else but Captain Demirovic, who's been on fire lately, a former Leipzig player, and their junior squad would rocket one to tie the game at 2, and that's how it would end. But I mentioned there were big matches in Germany and Spain. Here we go, pull out that large match book, because this is a big match. The most anticipated matchup of the weekend, Leverkusen league leaders taking on second place Bayern Munich, who has owned the Bundesliga over the last decade. Everyone was looking forward to this one. The home side would get the perfect start. After Leverkusen went on the attack, Bayern would force it out of play, and they were kind of finding themselves looking around. Leverkusen rushed the throw, catching them off guard. And a quick low cross met Josef Stanisic, who would score his first Leverkusen goal. What a time. And put the team 1-0 up after 18 minutes. The rest of the first half, it looked like Leverkusen was the more dangerous team. And then just 4 minutes into the second half, Leverkusen would double their lead. Great signing. Alex Grimaldo would get the ball and just blast it into the top shelf, giving them 2-0 lead after 50 minutes. That second goal kind of shook the Bavarian side a bit as they tried to ramp up the pressure, but they could never get that goal. And in stoppage time, Bayern would have a corner, and keeper Neuer would come up. He's known as a good finisher, too, to try and get a goal, but the ball would be cleared, and Leverkusen would counter, and Jeremy Frimpong would score into the empty net, giving Leverkusen the massive 3-0 victory. So after this crazy weekend, Leverkusen, they're still top of the table, still undefeated. They now have a 5-point cushion between second place Bayern Munich. And after their 3-0 win there, Stuttgart, they're tied in the third spot, 7 points behind Bayern. And Dortmund round out the top 4 with Leipzig just behind them. In Spain, match day 24 went down in La Liga. The weekend kicked off with Real Betis picking up a 2-0 win over Cadiz. Couldn't have asked for a better first start for former West Ham midfielder Pablo Fornals. He scored the second goal into that game to help seal the win for his new club. Osasuna went on the road and used the second half goal by Budimir to give the visitors a 1-0 surprise win over Real Sociedad. The home side had 69% of the possession but just could not get a goal. Las Palmas hosted Valencia, and despite dominating the game, they could just not get a goal. And on to the 89th minute, some nice footwork led to a dangerous cross, which was not handled well and ended up in the back of the Valencia net. Then in stoppage time, another dangerous cross by Las Palmas was mishandled again, this time by the keeper, and Las Palmas would score again. They'd win 2-0. 2 first-half goals by Mayorel and Jamie Mata would get Getafe up 2-0. And as the second half went on, Celta Vigo would increase their pressure. Strand Larson would get one back. Then the 85th minute, Allende would equalize the game for Celta Vigo, looking like this one would be a draw. But then Jamie Matza would had a perfect ball in the net, his second of the match, turning out to be the game winner. Huge win for Getafe at home. A very even match went down between Mallorca and Rayo Vallecano. No goals in the first half, but Mallorca would go ahead with Antonio Sanchez. Then Garcia Rivera would equalize, and in stoppage time, a Mallorca corner kick would lead to a wonderful header by Mariki, who would score the goal and secure the win for Mallorca. Sevilla hosted Atletico Madrid in a big matchup, and just 15 minutes into the match, a corner kick would lead to Isaac Romero knocking the ball in the net, giving Sevilla the early lead, and Atletico would dominate possession from that point on, but just could not tie it up. Sevilla take the big surprising win over one of the best clubs in Spain. And here's that big Spanish match. I mentioned the German one didn't live up to the hype, but here's a hyped up one. League leaders Real Madrid, might be wearing the jersey right now, taking on second place surprise team of the season, Girona. A real battle here with one of the Catalan not so giants, I guess, but we know Real Madrid usually faces off with Catalan giants Barca. Here's a smaller Catalan club, but one nonetheless who's having a great year. Unfortunately, their manager Michel couldn't watch the game. He got red carded last game and would have to miss this one. And Real Madrid got the perfect start. On their real first attack of the game, Vinicius Jr. would curl a beauty from long distance to give Real Madrid a 1-0 lead just 6 minutes into the match. Vinicius Jr. would show off more magic with a wonderful cross with the outside of his boot, just magic, right to Jude Bellingham, who would score, doubling the lead after 35. They take the 2-0 lead in the halftime, and it would be less than 10 minutes into the half where Vinicius Jr. again, showing off that fancy footwork, would get around the defender, having a shot, but the ball would get saved and bounce right to Bellingham, who would get his second of the match. Then the 61st minute, Rodrigo picked the ball up near half, going the entire distance before burying a goal, giving Real Madrid the 4-0 win, and that dominance, oof. That's how they take the game, 4-0. Girona's had a great season, but they've showed they're not Real Madrid at home. Only negative for Madrid in this one was Jude Bellingham picking up an ankle injury, and he'd have to get subbed out. They're saying he could be out until at least March. He's been one of the best players on this Real Madrid team all year, so we'll see what happens without him in the lineup. Alaves and Villarreal would play to a 1-1 draw. Barcelona and Granada would have one of the best games of the weekend. Lamine Yamal would put up Barca just 14 minutes in, but Richard Sanchez would equalize just before halftime with a booming strike. Then the second half, Barca would mishandle a pass dreadfully, and Granada would find Pellistri wide open in the box, who would knock it in, giving Granada the 2-1 lead. But that lead would last just minutes when Robert Lewandowski would equalize for Barcelona. But again, it wouldn't stay tied long, Ignacy Miquel would meet across with his head, banking it off the post, and boom, Granada's up again after 66 minutes. Barcelona was pushing on the pressure, trying to get anything that would help them. It would take a miscue. The Granada defender mishandled the ball just terribly outside his own box. Lamine would get the ball and just bang it into the corner. Amazing. The 16-year-old is carrying Barcelona. Unreal. And you shouldn't be relying on a 16-year-old to carry you, but hey, that's what Barcelona is right now. And they almost lost it late. Ter Stegen had to make a huge save to prevent them from losing that game. But yeah, like I said, massive for the youngster. There's one game left in the La Liga, Almeria hosting Athletic Bilbao. And after 24 games and a big win, Real Madrid leading La Liga with a 5-point cushion over Girona. Barcelona sit in third place, 4 points behind Girona, and Atletico Madrid round out the top four. But Athletic Bilbao could even them on points and even sneak ahead with goal differential, depending on how their match with Almeria goes. Serie A in Italy, you had some big matches. Empoli starting the weekend off with a bang, going on the road and beating Salernitana with a late penalty. The game was tied at 1 until they were awarded a penalty. Niang would convert, and then they'd add a third to take it 3-1. Lazio would pick up a big road win, beating Cagliari 3-1. Some history in that one. Lazio striker, Italian national Ciro Immobile, would score in the second half in that win over Cagliari. That was his 200th Serie A goal, becoming just the 8th player to do so, to hit the 200 mark. He's 74 behind Serie A leader and Italian icon Silvio Piola, so he's got a way to go to catch him. Roma would host Inter Milan in the Italian capital in a battle of massive clubs. Acerbi would put the visitors up just 17 minutes in, but Mancini would answer for Roma in the 28th minute. Just before halftime, El Shaarawy would put Roma ahead, and yeah, the crowd was loving it, even in the rain. But not even 4 minutes in the second half, Frenchman Marcus Thuram would equalize for Inter, and they'd continue putting up the pressure, leading to a tough own goal by Roma. Not much Angelino could do on that. When there's a dangerous cross in the box, you just hope that you can clear it and not put it in your own net. Then in stoppage time, Bastoni would add an insurance goal for Inter as they go on the road and win 4-2. Some really one-sided matches as well. Fiorentina would throttle Frosinone 5-1. Bologna skunked Lecce 4-0. Atalanta beat up on Genoa 4-1. Belgian Charles de Ketelaere continues to look amazing, scoring in that one. Theo Hernandez would score the lone goal in the 25th minute to give AC Milan the win over Napoli. Tough will go for Napoli this year. Nothing like the defending champions looked last year. Monza and Verona had a very uneventful 0-0 draw in their game. Juventus host Udinese on Monday to wrap up the match day. Some upcoming makeup games on the horizon as well. Bologna will host Fiorentina to make up for some postponed matches.
Oh, man.
Excuse me. But anyway, currently Inter Milan lead the Serie A. Juventus, even on games with Inter, are 7 points behind the leaders, but they can move a little closer depending how that game with Udinese goes. AC Milan 1 point behind Juventus, but they played one more match, and Atalanta rounding out the top four. We go to France to round up European footy here. They had some games in Ligue 1 this weekend. Weekend got off to a wild start, or a weird start, I guess. Heavy favorites Marseille would host Metz, and a direct red card, Samuel Gigio. And the home team were down a man just 31 minutes in. Despite the man down, Marseille were looking more dangerous and would go ahead in the 56th minute. Just not even 5 minutes later, Udol would equalize for Metz, and they'd secure the draw and helping them get out of that relegation zone. Brestois would take the lead on the road versus Clermont-Foot, only to give it up later, and both teams would go down with the red cards, so we'd have some 10-on-10 action, and that's the game it would end, 1-1. Brestois was really looking favored to take that. Lens picked up a 3-1 home win over Strasbourg. Nantes went on the road to beat Toulouse 2-1. Lorient hosted Reims and surprised them with a 2-0 win. 60th minute goal by Benjamin Beauregard would prove to be the difference in Rennes' win over Le Havre. Lyon would go down early to Montpellier after Norden would score in the 23rd minute, but two second-half goals, one by Alexander Lacazette and Maxence Kekere getting the other, would give Lyon the big comeback win. PSG hosted Lille in what was supposed to be a hyped-up match. The visitors put some scare in the PSG when Youssef Yassisi would score just 6 minutes into the match, but it was short-lived. Ramos would tie the game up just 4 minutes later. More PSG pressure would lead to a Lille own goal, then Kolo Muani would add the dagger late to give Paris the easy 3-1 win at home. The last fixture of the weekend was a wild one. Zakaria would put visiting Monaco ahead 1-0. Then the 37th minute, Laborde would convert from the spot to tie things up for Nice. Then the 50th minute, Zakaria would put his team ahead again. And not even minutes later, VAR would overturn a foul call and administer a direct red card, dismissing Dante from the game for Nice. Monaco continued to hold on to their lead until Nice equalized in the 74th minute. You're like, wow, they equalized with a man down. They're going to finish this a draw? But then Alexander Golovin would score and put Monaco ahead for good. Big win for Monaco there. After 21 games in the French top division, PSG's got a big lead, 11-point lead over second place Nice. The race behind PSG is a little tighter. Monaco just 1 point behind Nice, and Brestois in fourth, just 1 point behind Monaco. Lille and Lens are even on points, just outside the top four. The NHL, we had all our All-Star festivities in our rear mirror. We're moving on to the rest of the regular season. And the break wasn't kind to the Edmonton Oilers, right? They went in riding a 16-game winning streak, and they lose. Losing to the Las Vegas Golden Knights. They bounced back and beat the Ducks before getting shut out by the Kings and new interim coach Jim Hiller the very next night. So losing 2 out of the very next 3 after a 16-game winning streak is not ideal. But the Oilers return home for a game against Detroit before going back on the road. They still find themselves ahead of the Kings, but maybe the Kings' fortune will change with the new coaching change they made. The Canucks are still leading the Pacific Division and the NHL for that matter. Their new acquisition, Elias Lindholm, scored twice in his Canucks debut. The Jets have fallen a few spots in the Central Division, but Colorado's 4-game losing streak could help the Jets pass them again. Stars still holding on to a slim lead in the Central. Out east, the Bruins are still the cream of the crop in the Atlantic. The Panthers are still lurking and only trail the Bruins by 3 in that division. And the Rangers have a small lead over the Hurricanes in the Metropolitan Division. And my Flyers are nipping at their heels. Both teams on winning streaks. Rangers rocking a 4-game one, while my Flyers are on a 3-game one. The Islanders are still trying to find their way with Patrick Waugh leading the way as new head coach. Public enemy number one at the All-Star game, Tampa Bay Lightning, Nikita Kucherov, still leading the league in points with 89. Colorado's Nathan McKinnon just 5 points behind him in second place. NHL goal leader is still Austin Matthews, sitting at 42, only player to eclipse 40 this far. Sam Reinhart of Florida is right there, though, at 39. And number one overall pick, Connor Bedard, still leading the league in points and goals, despite missing all that time with his fractured jaw. Minnesota's Brock Faber is second in points, 2 behind him, and Minnesota's Marco Rossi is second in goals, 2 behind him. In the goaltending department, Winnipeg's Connor Hellebuyck leads the league in goals against average and save percentage, while Vancouver's Thatcher Demko leads the league in wins with 28. Brings us to some college hoops here. Some wild week in college hoops. Started with a bang with Kansas State surprising in-state rival Kansas with a 5-point overtime win. And the upsets didn't start there throughout the week. Clemson went on the road, gave North Carolina just their second loss in ACC play. Sticking in the ACC real quick, it was announced that Syracuse, they dismissed junior forward Benny Williams. He was suspended the first 2 games of the season for violating team rules, but the final straw may have come after their big loss to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. During that game, Williams was assessed a technical and shoulder bumped his head coach on the way out of the game, then proceeding to spit on the floor and throw his headband before skipping the handshake line at the end of the game. It's not going to go well for you if you're going to do that, I guess. Nevada surprised Utah State in the Mountain West. Some results that kind of went more according to plan was the number 1 team in the nation, UConn, beating up on Butler. In the Big 12, Houston beat Oklahoma State, Baylor, Texas Tech, Iowa State beat Texas, and Oklahoma's yo-yo season continued as they now beat a ranked BYU team pretty soundly. Kentucky destroyed Vanderbilt, and South Carolina won a nail-biter over Ole Miss. More midweek SEC play saw Tennessee thump LSU. Auburn beat up Alabama in a rivalry game. Duke beat Notre Dame pretty soundly in ACC, and Creighton's up and down season continued with the loss to Providence in the Big East. Wisconsin lost a close one to Michigan, their 3rd straight in Big Ten. And then leading in the weekend, there were some close games that needed overtime. Arizona escaped Utah with a tight overtime win. Florida Atlantic, not so lucky. They go to overtime and lose on the road at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And some offsets on some conference play went down. Dayton losing the VCU in a very low-scoring Atlantic 10 game. San Diego State got surprised by Nevada, who won their 3rd straight Mountain West game and second over a top 25 opponent. The weekend brought some good games too. One of my favorite conferences to watch all year, the Big 12, had some fun ones. Kansas bounced back from a loss to beat Baylor. Houston picked up a road win over the Bearcats in Cincinnati. Iowa State, BYU, and Texas Tech all picked up conference win as well over TCU, Kansas State, and UCF respectively. In the Big Ten, Purdue trounced Indiana. Michigan State surprised Illinois, and Wisconsin lost to an unranked Rutgers team. That was Wisconsin's 4th consecutive loss in the Big Ten, and 3 of those have been the unranked team. These Badgers are really struggling right now. The SEC had some great games too. Texas A&M stunning the visiting Volunteers, beating Tennessee by 16. Florida upset a ranked Auburn team as well, and then in some non-conference game, you had Gonzaga beating Kentucky at home. 3rd straight loss at Rupp Arena, the most in the building's history. The last time Kentucky lost 3 straight was in 1966, and that was before the Wildcats even played at Rupp Arena. A lot of trouble for Coach Cal and that Wildcats team right now. 2 favorites in the SEC that actually won, South Carolina defeating Vanderbilt and Alabama beating LSU. ACC, a late lane violation would really go the Tar Heels' way as they held off an upset to beat the University of Miami. Duke would take care of Boston College in the ACC as well. In the Big East, UConn still flexing that number one team as they beat down Georgetown. Creighton bounced back with a win over the Musketeers of Xavier. Marquette beat St. John's, and Florida Atlantic would need overtime again. This time they did a lot better, outscoring Wichita State by 13 in the extra frame. Like I said, UConn, they look like the number one team in the nation. I don't see anything changing there. I don't see Purdue or UNC dropping. But look for Marquette and the Big East start to climb, and South Carolina and the SEC. Both those teams rocking 7 game winning streaks. Usually, when you say South Carolina, you think women's hoops, but this men's side's doing really good. That's a good segue, too, women's hoops. NC State won a big ACC matchup over Louisville early in the week. West Virginia and Creighton both picked up conference wins. UConn destroyed Seton Hall. In the Big 12, Oklahoma had a big win over TCU, and BYU surprised Baylor, beating them by 12. Some midweek SEC play. I mentioned the number one team, South Carolina. They crushed Missouri by 38. LSU beat up on Vanderbilt as well. In the Big Ten, Caitlin Clark in her 27 was outshined by Hannah Stelke and her career-high 47 points in Iowa's win over Penn State. Staying in the Big Ten, Indiana needed a clutch bucket to beat Michigan State, while Ohio State destroyed Minnesota. Some ACC play at Louisville bouncing back from a loss to beat Notre Dame. Syracuse picked up a tight win over Georgia Tech. And Virginia Tech stunned NC State, giving the Wolfpack just their third loss on the season. As we began the roll into the weekend, Colorado showed off their squad in a 33-point dismantling of Oregon. Other West Coast matchups had Stanford needing overtime to beat Washington. UCLA flexing on Arizona, and Juju Watkins scoring 31 in a big USC win over Arizona State. Battle of two top 20 teams at Oregon State going into Utah and beating the Utes by double digits. Some Big 12 matchups in Kansas State holding on to a win by 1 over Oklahoma State. Baylor would beat a fellow ranked team in West Virginia. Texas beat up on TCU, while Oklahoma used a hot start to hold off a good Iowa State team. Gonzaga, Creighton, and Princeton each picked up wins in their respective conferences as well. A battle of two legendary schools in college hoops, one a little more recent than the other. Some non-conference play between South Carolina and UConn. You'd quickly get to see why South Carolina is the best team in college hoops. They'd end up winning by 18 over UConn. So much attention would be on Caitlin Clark as she chases Kelsey Plum's NCAA scoring record, but maybe they should pay more on the team game. Nebraska ended up upsetting Caitlin Clark's Iowa team. Clark scored 31 points, 10 dimes, and 8 boards, but they lost by 3 to the in-conference opponent. Caitlin Clark is now just 8 points away from breaking the record, and the next Iowa game is Thursday, February 15th against Michigan. So I'm pretty confident she's going to get the record then. You might want to tune into that one. Also in the Big Ten, Ohio State beat Michigan State. Indiana beat Purdue. The Pac-12 had a big surprise as Colorado just lost their 4th game of the season, losing to a tough Oregon State team. Also in the Pac-12, Stanford beat Washington State, UCLA beat Arizona State, and Utah bounced back with a win over Oregon. In the ACC, NC State bounced back with a beatdown of Pitt. Notre Dame would need 2 overtimes to beat Florida State. Some bad timed fouls and bad turnovers led to the Seminoles dropping that one. Virginia Tech would beat Boston College, and Syracuse would host Louisville on a battle of ranked teams, and the Orange would shock Louisville by icing the game at the free throw line. Some unranked rival teams met in the ACC, with Duke needing OT to prevail over North Carolina. And staying undefeated all year, South Carolina, they're still the best team in the nation. I'm interested to see where Iowa and Colorado look in the rankings following both of those teams' losses. Few teams racking up some long winning streaks. Gonzaga 18 in a row, Princeton 13, and Ohio State. Interesting to see where they will be in the rankings as well. Quick golf mentions. There's one of the wildest tour events over the weekend in Phoenix, the Waste Management Open. They had to stop selling liquor at one point. It was getting so rowdy. It was starting to look like Happy Gilmore out there. This place was even getting a little too wild for their wild atmosphere they created. After all the liquor and smoke cleared, Canadian Nick Taylor would outlast Charlie Hoffman in a playoff, take the tournament, 4th career win on tour for Nick Taylor. Good on him. You might remember him from winning the Canadian Open last year. There was some live tournament going down in Vegas as well. Someone I used to work with was at the tournament. I was like, oh, damn, I didn't even know I was going down. Dustin Johnson shot a weekend best 12 under, but the best team was Smash GC. Johnson's 4 aces finished in second. Still weird with that team aspect. Some MLB mentions. Jose Altuve is sticking around in Houston. The little guy signed a $125 million 5-year contract extension to stay with the Astros until 2029. Former multiple Cy Young winner Corey Kluber announced he's retired from the game after 13 seasons. Not the biggest, flashiest signing the Jays were hoping to make this offseason, but they signed right-hand pitcher Yariel Rodriguez on a 5-year, $32 million contract. The Cubans pitched in Japan as well as in his home country, Cuba, so it's interesting to see what he'll bring to the Jays. Quick boxing news, Devin Haney announced there'll be a fight between him and Ryan Garcia on April 20th, 420 in Las Vegas. The WNBA, Kalea Copper, you've heard me talk about her in this show quite a bit. She's a beast. She's leaving Chicago to go to the Phoenix Mercury. Candace Parker's running it back one more year, signing with the Las Vegas Aces on a 1-year deal. And two-time former WNBA MVP Ella Delle Donne has announced she's taking some time away from basketball, so she won't be signing with the Washington Mystics this upcoming season. Some quick CFL news. Winnipeg Blue Bombers signed Brady Olivier to a 2-year deal. 26-year-old led the CFL in rushing last year and claimed Most Outstanding Canadian award. The Bombers didn't end their business there, also signing a 1-year deal with star receiver Dalton Schoen. The Lions reached an agreement with free agent running back William Stanback as well. Quick Olympic news here. Our Canadian women's basketball team qualified, but it wasn't very easy. We lost to Japan and needed some help to advance. So here comes Spain to the rescue. Spain, dramatic comeback. They were down 22 at one point. They came all the way back to upset Hungary. But then I felt bad for Hungary in front of their home crowd. They haven't been to the Olympics for 44 years in women's basketball. All they had to do was win, and they slowly fell apart as Spain came back to beat them. You could see the tears and disappointment. But Canada, pretty good. We slither in there, and we're going to the Olympics in Paris this summer. Good on the women there. Quick shout out to the local WHL team, the Saskatoon Blades. Went to a game Friday against my hometown PA Raiders, and what a game. We killed them. We started heckling the goalie a bit. It was fun. The Blades already clinched a spot in WHL playoffs. They're looking like a legit team, maybe a Memorial Cup winning team. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's pretty big. So if you're around, check out the game, support the team. Wow, that was a long segment there. Let's bring me to a quick short here. We can end this on a quick note here, but first a serious note, like we had a wild, great week of sport, but it should be everywhere else in Gaza right now. It's ridiculous. I haven't mentioned anything on here, hoping we'd be done with this by now, but we're witnessing a genocide on social media, and we're just asking for a ceasefire that won't happen. And it's terrible. So I have some friends out there doing a lot to support. I'm not always out there, so I appreciate what those people do, and you're doing great things. But, around the city here, this weird weather, it's hot and it's cold, it's yes and no, I don't know. They're singing songs about it, or maybe not about here, could be something else. But anyway, there's so much ice. Not good. It's good for hockey, not so good for walking. So let's just talk about a few slippery incidents. I'm not hiding anything from work. These ones were all reported at work, but one of them that happened at work in this parking lot behind one of the buildings we work at, it was, you're trying to not move too fast and take big strides, but, you can't just dawdle. So, I slipped, and I knew it was bad when you look down and you can see your toes, but you're in the air, you're like, uh-oh. Then, lower back, whiplash, back of the head. And if you listen to the show a bit, I've hit my head enough where I probably should be wearing a helmet or have the Reggie Ray counter, like, no, another team movie, something, but that was one of the worst ones. But, we all get those ones where you slip and you kind of do a little dance before wiping out. But those are more pride pains than physical pains. You just look around to make sure no one saw you kind of thing. But, yeah, it's pretty brutal. I got the spikes now, and it seems like the spikes are the way to do it. If you don't have them, you get these cleats or whatever, these spikes, and it works. It's not in deep snow, which we also got, but winter, am I right? But just be safe out there when walking, Pros and cons of Canada life. But hey, it's episode 49 in the book, yo. It's the end of the NFL for now, right? We're not going to see any more games anytime soon. But we've got a good off season to look forward to. We got Champions League coming back this week. Daytona 500 next week. One of the biggest races ever, right? We got the All-Star game coming up in the NBA with the crazy antics of the weekend. If you're wondering about that, go to my page, check out the NBA recaps, and stuff there. But hey, next episode will be the half century mark. Fitty, I don't think I'll have 50 Cent here. Hell, who knows? We'll try. But I highly doubt it. But Bob episode number 50 coming up. Thanks again for